The Historical Society of Ottawa acknowledges that as we share these stories from our past, we are on what remains the unceded land of the Algonquin Anishinaabe people. Thank you so much for joining us for today's episode. This series is a collaboration between the Historical Society of Ottawa and Rogers TV. I'm Ben Weiss. I'm with the Historical Society of Ottawa, where we've been telling Ottawa's great story since 1898. If you find Ottawa history as fascinating as we do, I urge you to check out our website, our monthly speaker series, and follow us on Facebook and Instagram. And enjoy today's segment.
Hi, my name is Rick Henderson. I'm a local historian and descendant of Philemon and Abigail Wright. They are my fourth great-grandparents. I came by writing history and recording history about 20 years ago. When my father died, he passed on the mantle of being family historian and genealogist to me. And after years of research, what ended up happening was that my children basically said, Dad, you've got a lot of knowledge there, and you've got a lot of stuff that you should absolutely be recording and putting down. And so that's where it began. And I put down all my research into a book that I thought was only going to be shared by the family, and turned out that few people wanted to read it. So that's how I got into the research. But also there's the aspect that on the Quebec side of the river, the history of Philemon Wright was not only little known, but it was also in the hands of many was corrupted as well, in the sense that there were some people who had a very strong reason in their minds to erase the history or to lessen the importance of Philemon Wright and his founding the first permanent settlement in the Ottawa Valley. So as time went by, I had come to the realization that the Wright story was being either neglected and in some cases, as I say, even distorted. So I did plenty of research to correct those parts that I thought were mistakes, and along the way ended up discovering some very, very, I think, significant things, because I think it's well known that he was the founder of the first permanent settlement in the Ottawa Valley. It's also well known that he founded the Ottawa timber industry in the Ottawa Valley. But one lesser known detail is that Philemon Wright was also the founder, he and his sons I should say, was the founder of the cement industry in Canada. And that began mostly when he founded the settlement in 1801. But then really took on a great amplitude by the time the canal was being built in 1828. At that time, that's when his village that he had created, basically created in 1802, his village became a very important site for Colonel By and his Royal Engineers. A bridge had to be built across the Ottawa River. The Union Bridge is what it was called, and it was the first bridge ever across the Ottawa River. And it had to be built so that Colonel By and his Royal Engineers could get all the provisions they needed, not to mention the cement that they needed to build the canal. And on the Ottawa side of the river, the south side, there was an absolute wilderness. So the fact is they needed a staging area, a place for the men to be able to be provisioned, and to receive their provisions, because Philemon Wright had already a very good and strong infrastructure in place for a village that could make the building of the Rideau Canal possible. The significant thing one could say also is that when talking about this video that you're about to see, a walk in Wrightstown in 1830, is that without Wrightstown, the Rideau Canal would probably have been built, but only maybe 10 years later, while Colonel By and his Royal Engineers set up a village. So having that village there was absolutely key. And now I guess I'd like to continue to present the video of walking in Wrightstown in 1830. Hi there, my name is Rick Henderson, and I'm going to be accompanying you on this virtual walk through Wrightstown in 1830. For years I've studied maps and paintings to get a feel of what Wrightstown must have been like at the beginning. It was founded in 1800 by my great-great-great-grandfather, Philemon Wright, and it was the first permanent colonial settlement of the Ottawa Valley. Many people, and even a few historians, have mentioned how great it would be to be transported back in time to take a walk through Wrightstown in 1830. The paintings give an idea, but most would love a chance to actually be there. So I decided I'd try to put all my research together with some of the rusty set design skills I'd acquired in my past to create this virtual walk through Wrightstown. To give some historical perspective, 1830 was the year after 70-year-old Philemon had to lay his beloved wife Abigail to her eternal rest. Their eldest son, Philemon Jr., had built everything in Wrightstown with his father, but he had also died 9 years before. Before we begin our walk into town from the Union Bridge, let's begin with a virtual flyover the town. We're going to begin our walk through Wrightstown from the Union Bridge. This bridge, the first bridge to cross the Ottawa River, is named Union because, not long after, Upper and Lower Canada provinces themselves would be united. Philemon Wright and Sons played a major role in building it. As a matter of fact, this stone arch was designed by John Mackay, but failed when it was first built. So it was rebuilt by Philemon Wright, a design of his own, using a technique that John Mackay himself was not even aware of. The bridge was a necessary first step in building the Rideau Canal because Wrightstown had to be the supply center and staging area for Colonel By and his Royal Engineers. In 1830, the canal was just about halfway to its completion. More than 20 years before this, in 1806, Philemon Wright built and floated the first square timber raft down the Ottawa River to Quebec City, which began the Ottawa Valley timber industry. Right here beside the road to the bridge, we can see the ingenious canal work and excavation done by Philemon to flood a large pond for storing the logs that would be brought to his sawmill. Philemon also built a dam to make this happen and rightfully brags about it in his 1824 report to the Lower Canada Assembly. Wrightstown began with the building of 3 log houses, which we'll see later on. Also, though, a blacksmith shop and 3 mills, a sawmill, a gristmill, and a hemp mill. Although Philemon and his family first lived on the Gatineau farm by the Columbia Pond, he and his wife Abigail had always expected to move here by the falls, to what he named the Columbia Falls Farm. So we're looking at his home and store, the first store here in the heart of Wrightstown. Just past Philemon's house and store is the stately Columbia Hotel. John McTaggart wrote, "The township of Hull now become a fashionable resort. A splendid hotel was built. Livery stables were well stalled, a steamboat set a-going, flagstaff and bell erected, while a magazine was filled with gunpowder, and an armory richly filled with cannons, muskets, and swords. But this was not all, nor the half of all. Churches and chapels and schools were built, and priests, surgeons, schoolmasters, and lawyers were frequently to be met with at Hull. From the beginning, Abigail had taken care of the spiritual well-being of the population of Hull Township, teaching Bible school and holding services in her own home. But by 1823, the townspeople decided to build a proper church on land donated by Philemon for the cause. St. James Church was completed in a year. From the very beginning of the settlement, Philemon could only rely on himself for supplies because the nearest village was 120 miles away. One of the first things he built on the Columbia Falls farm was a lime kiln so that he would have sufficient amounts of potash for fertilizer, mortar for building, making soap, and whitewash. By 1830, Philemon and Sons were supplying most of the cement for the Rideau Canal, so 8 lime kilns were now operating to supply the demand. The archives show that Philemon and Sons had acquired a recipe for Roman cement by this time, and so here we're looking at the very beginning of Canada's cement industry. The Wright family would continue to make what they called Hull cement by Philemon Island for another 70 years. So just downriver, where today you'll find the Museum of History, this is where the steamboat landing could be found. In 1819, Philemon Jr. partnered with Thomas Mears to build a steamboat that would serve to transport travelers and goods from Grenville to Wrightstown and back. The Union of the Grand or Ottawa steamship began service in 1823. It was 125 feet long, 23 feet abeam, and it had to be flat-bottomed with very little draft to be able to navigate the often shallow Ottawa River. To accommodate the travelers properly, the Wrights built the King's Hotel and Store here at the landing, but also built the grander Columbia Hotel in the village. And 4 miles down King's Road, at the Chaudière Lake Landing, built the Wright Hotel in what is Aylmer today. Here we are back in the village common, where we're looking at the large stone home of Tiberius Wright, built in 1819, and the boarding house for the workmen on the Columbia Falls farm in 1813. In 1818, Ruggles Wright, the third son, moved into his parents' home on the common and took charge of the store and much of the business operations at the falls. At that time, Philemon built his mansion that we can see on the hill in the distance. We'll talk more about that in a moment. The house we see here is the home of Thomas Brigham and Abigail Wright, Philemon and Abigail's third daughter. Thomas and Abigail were married in 1816, so it can be assumed that the house was built around that time. The stone fence you see here still stands today, bordering the park at the corner of Montcalm Street and Taché Boulevard. We're about to cross Brewery Creek, and I must say a word at least about its name. It's called Brewery Creek because Wright's brewery and distillery was built just downstream in 1813 on the southeast corner of Columbia Farm. It was one of the first long-operating distilleries in Canada after John Molson's in Montreal. Molson was a friend and business associate of Philemon's. We're looking at Philemon's mansion that he jokingly called the White House. Philemon served in General Washington's army, and he was a big fan. So after Washington finished building the White House in 1800, I'm thinking Philemon decided that this was to be known as the Northern White House. Philemon's White House was truly the most important house in the township for years, and there he and Abigail hosted governors and many prominent businessmen that would shape Canada in the years to come. The view from his front step overlooking the village and the falls must have been breathtaking. We'll take a look before continuing our walk. At this spot on the south side of the town common are the 4 shops that served the townspeople. The 4 shops from closest to farthest were the Hatter's shop, Mr. Anderson's store, the bakehouse, and the tannery, also known as the harness and shoemaker's shop. As you've probably seen during our walk, there's one building that dominates the town common, and it's this beautiful, large stone building with the bell tower or cupola on top. It was simply called the New Store by the Wrights, but others wrote that it was more than that. In the famous Duvernay painting of 1824, it's called Wright's Tavern. Philemon called it the Burrow House in his report. Joseph Bouchette, Surveyor General of Lower Canada, called it the Meeting House. And Surveyor Anthony Swalwell named it on his maps the Office. As a result, many have argued its purpose. I believe that given its size and important location in the center of the Commons, tells us that it was all of the things that others said it was at different times. I've taken to calling it Wright's Tavern Store. This is the town common. Philemon grew up in Massachusetts, and every town he knew had a town common or town square in which you'd almost invariably find the meeting house, or what Philemon called the Burrow House. There'd be a tavern and usually the church. Philemon's village was designed in the very same fashion. We've come to the back of Wright's Tavern Store to take a look at the Hull Slide, the square timber crib slide built just a year before by Philemon Wright and Sons. Ruggles had taken the idea of the single log flumes of Scandinavia and greatly expanded them to allow a whole crib to slide down and bypass the falls. Before the Hull Slide was built, cribs had to be taken apart and sent down the rafting channel piece by piece. Before long, 2 other safer slides would be built in the Chaudière precinct, and the Hull Slide became less occupied. It was said that 10 men a year would be lost in the terrifying rides down the Hull Slide. The sawmill and foundry were just over the timber slide from the common. As I said earlier, the mills and blacksmith shop were among the first things built in Wrightstown because they were absolutely essential to making a go of it in this wilderness. But in 1808, they all burned down, and Philemon almost gave up to go back to Massachusetts. And if it wasn't for his sons Philemon Jr. and Tiberius, he probably would have. They gathered some of the associates together and built them back, bigger and better, in less than 6 months. The ones you see here were the ones built in 1808. The foundry was a huge 3-story high stone building with hydraulically operated bellows for the 4 ovens and a hydraulic trip hammer for the cement manufactory. And what would a pioneer village be without a grist mill? And this is it. It was equipped with 4 grinding stones that operated from the water that was channeled here by the dam and canal that Philemon built. Earlier, we heard John McTaggart's glowing description of the gun house, seen here, in which he says it was filled with powder, swords, muskets, and cannons. From the beginning, the township of Hull had a militia which enlisted all of the adult men. And what's a militia without an arsenal and arms? Many have said that Philemon never intended to build a village or town, that he was simply interested in building an agricultural community. And there is some truth to that at the beginning. But by 1830, Philemon had created a thriving, well-supplied village and the 2 most important industries of Canada's industrial era, the Ottawa Valley timber industry and the cement industry. An interesting anecdote that can be added to this story is that it was in 1830 that traveler and historian Godfrey Ving travels through the Ottawa Valley. He meets Philemon Wright, has several conversations with him, finds him to be a fascinating gentleman, and writes in 1830, 27 years before the choice is made for Canada's capital, that Philemon Wright predicts that one day this area will be Canada's capital. This virtual walk was created from the information contained in the maps, paintings, pictures, and business records of Wrightstown that so many created in the past, so that you will understand exactly where everything that you've seen here is situated. Here's another flyover, this time in today's world. This should help to situate. During this flyover, I want you to imagine just how content Philemon would be that his prediction was realized in the fullness of time. Thanks for watching, and I hope you've enjoyed our walk.